Welcome to Nurturing Our Roots, the journey from slavery to freedom, live Zoom session with Antoinette and Karen. We are live every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, the talk show where ordinary people with extraordinary family stories can be heard. If you have a family story and would like to share it with us, we'll be happy to listen to your family story. Please contact us at nurturingourroots@gmail.com. I'm Antoinette, and I'm going to turn it over to Karen. And everybody know weekly I have to disappear. And once she introduced this very special guest, I want to just talk about what I think about this dynamic genealogist, author, researcher who I have come to admire over the years. So let me just turn it over to my co-host. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Antoinette.
How are you?
I'm wonderful, wonderful, and excited about our show tonight.
I am too. And hi, Angela, but I'm just going to disappear a minute, all right?
No problem. Good to see you.
Hi, Angela. Welcome to Nurturing Our Roots. It's so wonderful to have you here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited and I'm quite honored to be here as well.
I am looking forward to hearing more about all of the amazing work that you do around this very, very important topic, African Americans and our research into our Indian or Native American ancestry. It's probably one of the things that comes up a lot in the chat room. People are talking about Native American ancestry. And of course, you have heard, as a genealogist, you have heard many people say, well, you know, my grandmother say that we you know, this type of Native American or that type of Native American. So we all have those oral histories. And I do too. And unlike most people, I wasn't actually believing it until I started seeing it show up in my DNA results or my family's DNA results. I wasn't really believing the story. I thought it was just another one of those stories that are in families. So we are hoping that you will be able to help us shed some light on how do we prove or disprove some of those oral histories we've gotten.
Okay. I hope I can help. I certainly hope I can do that.
I'm sure you can, because you've done so much research. And, you know, why don't you tell us some of the things you've been doing lately?
Well, lately, oh my gosh, I've been making several videos for the last several months, but I've been writing a lot. And I started a project, actually, I guess this is the fourth year. I started a project in 2017, and I decided to participate in the popular blogging meme of documenting 52 ancestors in 52 weeks. Well, my folks are basically just good, ordinary folks. And I didn't know if I had 52 people I wanted to write about extensively. But because I research a community that is not written about enough, I decided to document 52 families in 52 weeks. That was 20.
I like that. I like that.
And so I profiled 52 families. And at the end of that year, and I did complete it. I'll never do that again, though. Trust me. that was really work. But I spent a large part of 2018 putting all of those pieces, and I had put them on my blog. Every week I updated my blog and would put a family profile up. But the reason why I decided to try and consolidate it, because number one, I know that everyone doesn't read blogs. Everybody out there, and especially many of the people who descend from the families that I profile, they're not always hunting for blogs, looking for their ancestral stories. So I decided to try and put it into a book manuscript, which I did. But when I put it together, it was over 500 pages.
Oh my.
I said, you know what? I wouldn't buy a 500-page book about different families, but I might buy a smaller volume. So I decided to divide that project into two. And so volume one was published in 2019, called Freedmen of the Frontier, and I'll talk about that later. And volume two was published last year in 2020. And so, what it is, Freedmen of the Frontier, focusing on the families that I research in Eastern Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is one of my ancestral states. My father's Oklahoman, and my family is from the Choctaw Nation in Eastern Oklahoma, LaFleur County to be very specific. But at that time, there was no LaFleur County because there was no state of Oklahoma. It was simply the Choctaw Nation. But I research families not only from the Choctaw Nation, but also Cherokee Nation, Chickasaw Nation, Creek Nation, and Seminole Nations, because although the histories and cultures differ, there's one similar factor that took all of these African descended people to Indian Territory, and that was Black chattel slavery. My ancestors from the Choctaw Nation had been enslaved. They were taken west during the years of the Indian removal in the 1830s, the forced migration, the Trail of Tears. And my ancestors were taken west along with Choctaws from a Choctaw family, the Perry family from Yallabusha, Mississippi.
Oh,
And
wow. Mhm.
Yallabusha, in fact, is a Choctaw word, by the way. Yallabusha is a Choctaw word that means yellow tadpole.
Mhm.
And but that is where the Perrys are from. There's even still a Perry Creek in Yallabusha County. But anyway, this is where my family certainly was in the 19th century and into the 20th century. And I went looking for that family history and found incredible records from 5 different nations that also took
Lucky
it.
you. Lucky you.
It was just amazing. And I've been doing it. This will be my 30th year
Oh,
of research.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
I've
Angela,
enjoyed it.
whenever you're ready for me to pull up your records, but I just want to say I really admire your research. From a distance, we don't say it often enough, but I just want you to know how much I appreciate your research and your dedication and your commitment. And you
Thank
have
you.
certainly left a impact up on the genealogy department in our lives for our ancestors. And just the way you not only help your family do your own family research, but you have also paved the way for so many other people who will be looking for those Native American family members. And so we appreciate you and thank you so much.
Oh, I appreciate your kind words. This is something that sometimes you see something and you realize, wait a minute, look at this plethora of records. Their stories have never been told. It's
Yes.
not just my family, but there
Mhm.
are thousands of other families, and which is
Mhm.
why I've committed myself to this research.
Mhm. That's so that well, you answered the question, I wanted to know how did you commit yourself and you answered that, you see?
Well, the thing is that that first day when I was at the National Archives and I was scrolling, remember the old days of scrolling microfilm, but
Yes,
no
yes.
internet? I know you know those days. And when a card came across my eyes, card number 777, and I'm not a superstitious or a gambler, but 777 was my lucky number. And when I saw the card, that enrollment card, and I remember I stopped and I went, that's them. And I couldn't believe it. And I remember getting up, asking one of the attendants at the archives, excuse me, could you come and tell me exactly what am I looking at? And it was a young guy, he was an intern or something for a summer job. He didn't know. He was chewing gum saying, oh, that's cool. What's that? So then I realized, okay, he can't help me, but I've got to learn in terms of what is the historical circumstance that created these records that I was looking at.
Wow.
And
So do you mind if I pull up one of the records for
please
you?
do. Please pull
Yes.
up the enrollment card of Sam and Sally Walton and the family. Sally Walton, by the way, was my great grandmother, and she was born in the middle of the Civil War in 1863. But she lived a very long life, and
Would
she
this be the one?
yeah, that's an interview. Pull up one of the cards, those horizontal cards.
Okay,
And
I have, let me see.
okay,
This is the other email that I received.
yeah, I think I sent two. I sent two. So sorry.
Okay, is this it?
No, that's still part of a testimony.
Okay, do you have it right in front of you.
I can pull it up if you just give me a moment. I will.
Yes, I could give, and let me just give you permission to share your screen.
Sure. While
Because
you're
those was the two
that.
emails that I received.
Okay. Okay. And while you're doing that, I
Okay.
will pull up the card and have it. So as soon as I share, you'll be able to.
Sure. It's so good to, because I know in Tangipahoa Parish where I live at, the Choctaw Indians was here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, they was here.
Now I'm curious, in that particular parish where you are those Gina Choctaws? Do you know?
I don't know because I came across those records from
Okay.
someone that was about to throw them away.
Oh my goodness.
And so they allowed me to go into this trunk and get all these records out. And it was just really it was letters, there was writing to the Philadelphia Indian.
Okay, to the Indian Agency. Okay.
And also there was some letters concerning the treaty.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm familiar with. You were probably looking at Mississippi Choctaw.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, this is the document and at that time it was not digitized in color. It was in black and white.
Really?
So let me show you very closely. Now, Sally was my great grandmother. She didn't pass away until 1961, so she was 98 years old when she passed. So I knew her. She was my babysitter until I went to kindergarten and first grade. I knew Sally very well. And there are, by the way, you see her husband, my great grandfather, Samuel. And there are 4 Samuels in my family. My great grandfather, my grandfather Sam, my father Sam, and my brother Sam. So
yes, I see 2 Sams here.
Yes, you see my great grandfather Sam and my great grandmother Sally. You see Uncle Houston, and you see Sam Jr., my grandfather, who was 9 years old on this card. And you also see my aunt Louisa. We call her Louisa, although it looks like Louisa, but we say Louisa in Oklahoma talk. But
so how old was your grandmother Sally? I mean, what year was Sally born? Do you know?
1863.
1863, and you knew something. Isn't that amazing?
And guess what I did not know about her? Keep your eye on this line where her name is. And as I move over to the right, look what this says. Slave of Emily Perry.
Wow.
That I did not know. I knew Sally was from the Choctaw Nation. That's something that was known. I mean, my hometown is Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is right on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. And if you're on the north side of the city, you're adjacent to the old Cherokee Nation. If you're on the south side, you're adjacent, to the Choctaw Nation. And she was born and raised in the Choctaw Nation. That was known. She was Choctaw. But I never knew until I found this document. And I found this document in May of 1991. Wow. That was 30 years ago. Wow. And it was 30 years after she died.
Really?
And I saw this record saying that she was a slave of Emmeline Perry.
Have you looked into Perry's records, Emmeline Perry's records?
Well, by the time that this record was created, and let me show you, this record was created in June of 1899.
Yes.
Okay. So they were applying for land allotment eligibility. They were applying to have their name put on a roll of people who were going to be eligible to receive allotments of land. And the reason why this process was going on, and you've heard of the Dawes roll. Well, the roll is basically a roll of eligibility. And the reason why people were going through this, it was not to join anything. They were already members of the tribe. But Oklahoma statehood was approaching. The goal was to open up all this land that had been sovereign Indian land and to open it up for white settlers. But before they did that, okay, we're going to allot some land to people who are already here. Now, prior to that time, land was owned in common. You know, I could let my cow graze in your pasture. You could let your cow come and graze in my pasture. But the idea was now to introduce the concept of private parcels of land
Mhm.
that you fence off so others couldn't come and other livestock couldn't wander on your property, because no longer do we all own this land together. Now, private land, fence it off, nobody can encroach. And then the remaining millions of acres after people got their parcels of land, the millions of acres that remained would be open for white settlement, and Oklahoma, a new nation, would be able to join the Union, which it did in 1907. So
Mm.
all of this was to introduce the land allotment process.
Wow.
But of course, you see Samuel, and
Mhm.
you see Samuel was a slave of Jim Davis. I
Uh,
never knew these facts about my great grandparents. All I know is that they were from the Choctaw Nation. But let me show you something else, which is the very next image. And I'm going to move some things out the way here.
Angela, was it emotional for you when you found these records?
Well, it was like, what am I looking at? At first, it wasn't emotional. It was like, what? What do you mean she was a slave? I knew her. So I
Uh-huh.
was kind of indignant at first. What do you mean? This is my great grandmother, that you're
Mhm.
talking about. So then, but look at this. Now, first of all, let's go back to the previous page. There are 5 people in the house
Mhm.
on lines 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The what you're looking at, and see this at the bottom, additional information on the reverse side.
Mhm.
That's what this next exposure is. It's
Oh.
the reverse side of the same card. And
Oh.
as you can see, Sam was on number 1. Here's his father,
Hmm.
Patrick. It looks like an abbreviation for Patrick, which I
Yeah.
found out later is Patrick. And it was Drenard, but it was really Drennan. I also learned that later as well. And it talks about the tribal enrollment. He was deceased at that time. Says
Mhm.
his father was not a citizen.
Mm.
Father's owner, nothing's there. The name of his mother, Lydia.
So
And
you was able to go back several generations
on this one card.
on this one card. How
So
exciting.
look at this. I mean, let's go back to that front page. You
Mhm.
see now, my grandfather, then there's his father. There are both of his parents. That's a second generation. And
Uh-huh.
then as we get to this image on the next page,
Three,
there's the third generation
third, and
for
here's four.
Samuel. And guess what? Also for Sally. I never knew her parents' names.
Look at
Her
that.
father was a man called Eastman Williams.
Uh-huh.
It's that Father's Tribal Enrollment, Scullyville. That's a community that
Mhm.
was in the old Choctaw Nation.
Mhm.
He was also deceased, which is what that DD means.
Mhm.
Look at this father's owner. He had no owner. His father was
Hmm.
Choctaw Indian.
Yeah, Choctaw.
Hmm.
But
The
there's another
mother
name.
of
Yeah.
Sally was a woman called Manda Hunt. And you know what this answered for me? A question. Because when Sally died in 1961, our family received her old family Bible. It was given to my father. Well, Manda Hunt's name was in the Bible. I
Oh
never
my
knew who it
God.
was. And so was Lydia. I didn't know who Lydia was, and I didn't know who Manda was. But it was their parents. Of course, when their parents died, they would write it in the family Bible.
And the card just validated what was in the Bible.
That's
Yes,
amazing.
yes,
Amazing.
which was totally, totally amazing. So I'll stop my share on that. So it was just a joy to find that. But then what I did when I was pranking the microfilm, after I saw it, and I said, "Can I make a copy?" And they said, "Oh, sure." They showed me how to take the microfilm off and go to the copier, which I did. And then I looked, and something else, there was a finding aid, which was a guide to the microfilm records. And I looked where it talked about the 5 tribes. They were known frequently as the 5 civilized tribes, which is
Mhm.
kind of an offensive term. And what does civilized mean as
Mhm.
opposed to what uncivilized? But anyway, I saw another subset of records called enrollment applications. And I noticed it also said Choctaw Freedmen. And if you notice on that card, it said Choctaw Nation,
Yes.
Freedmen Roll. So I said, well, here's some other records called Freedmen Records. And it mentioned, different roles. And at this point, I knew that number on that card was 777. So I said, okay, let me see if I can find a similar record in these applications. Do they match? I don't know. As it turned out, they do match. And I found an interview. Now, you put up a document a minute ago, I think, Antoinette, and it
Mhm.
was an
The
interview.
interview.
Yes, if you can show that, because it provided, I mean, of course, I'm looking at the card, trying to, determine, wow, what am I looking at? And then, and as I said, looking at the card, this is where I got emotional. Now, if you blow that up just a little bit, if you can, or actually, that's okay. I think it can be seen. First of all, I realized this is June 1899. And
Uh-huh.
here I've highlighted it in red. I'm reading the actual words spoken
Uh-huh.
by my ancestors. They were sworn under oath and they're talking. What is your name? Sam Walton. How old are you? About 56. Were you a slave? Yes, sir. And he goes on, well, who was your master? Where were you born? In Arkansas. And
Well,
then,
look at the master, Harrell. Do you see
yes.
that?
No, I can't see it.
Okay, let me read that to you.
Wait, because I want to know what Harrell is that?
Okay, he said, if you can't enlarge it, I'll read it for you.
Mm-hmm.
It says, who was your master? Josiah Harrell. Where were you born? In Arkansas. Where were you at the time of the surrender? He meant the end of the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the Choctaw Nation. Where have you lived since then? Right in the nation ever since. I have been out of the nation on business, but my home has always been in the territory, meaning Indian territory. And then he said, did your master bring you from Arkansas over here? He sold me over here because
Ooh.
this interview is taking place in Indian territory.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, he sold me over here. Who to? Jim Davis. What was Jim Davis? A Choctaw. And so then, of course, they go on and
Mm-hmm.
ask other questions. And then Sally comes in. And I think, at the bottom, she comes in and they're just saying, what's your name? Who did you belong to? The Perrys. And I think there's another image I sent you of a
Yeah, I
second.
see Gilbert Perry. Yeah, there's another one.
Right. And there's a second page if you can pull that other page up.
Okay.
Because what also surprised me was, they were asking her about her mother. And in that particular interview, I was surprised because, let's see, is it on that one? No, okay, it's not on that one, but I'll explain what it said
Mm-hmm.
when they asked her who her mother was. She, that name for the Bible was Amanda Hunt or Amanda Hunt, but Sally gave her Choctaw name, Amanda Anchatabi. And I was surprised even
Oh.
to see that because I did not know what, first of all, I didn't know who Amanda was, and certainly didn't know that her name was Anchatabi before it was Amanda Hunt. So that was just a complete,
Oh, that is just great findings.
it was amazing. Now, what's also interesting was that if you see where it says Nell Perry being duly sworn, he's part of the Perry family that came from Yalobusha County, Mississippi. And in the middle, it asks him, do you know they're talking about my great grandmother Sally? And they're saying, well, do you know who she was freed under? Right there. And he says, the mother of Sally Walton was freed under my sister, Emmeline Perry. And if you
Oh,
remember Emmeline's name from the
yes.
front of that card, and it says, was your sister a Choctaw? Yes, sir. She was freed here in the Choctaw Nation, was she? Yes, sir. And then they go on and ask other questions about the family.
Look
But
at what she says in one. She says that she was here in the Choctaw Nation at the time of freedom. Was she? Yes, sir. She was a very small child and she was still a suckling child at that
let me
time. So
tell you,
that
when
was
I
interesting.
saw that, and I just got another chill just as you read that, keep in mind that I knew Sally well. I don't know if you have her picture, but she
I do.
was my heart. She was my babysitter. If I wanted sassafras tea, she would make it for me. And she was a person, if I wanted a bowl of pashafa, she would give it to me. And I knew her in the last decade of her life. That's Sally. Oh, my heart. But
Wow.
here is a man saying she was still a sucking child when
Wow.
freedom came. And a man who knew her when she was an infant. And this is the face that I knew. She's my heart. And wow, it just
Can you
really.
only imagine that if you just knew genealogy at that time and just was able to look at the, oh my God, you would have spent hours upon hours just interviewing and recording.
Oh my gosh. And to think about it now. And I remember my mother and sometimes my father would refer to her brother who came to visit Uncle Joe. And Uncle Joe came to visit her once from Oklahoma. And the story is how they used to sit out in the backyard and they were speaking Choctaw to each other because that was their mother tongue. And so, and of course, both of them were either, they were going between smoking their corn cob pipe and dipping snuff, and of course, spitting out the snuff too. Now, this is a picture of them when they were young and not too long after they had gotten married. And this is an image from that old tintype that I have of,
Wow, this is amazing.
and that is Samuel Walton and Sally Walton as a young woman. And yeah,
To
she's,
have the photographs and then have the narratives
yes,
and
yes,
text.
And to have known her.
and
Oh,
to have known her
yes,
and loved her. And
yes.
yeah, she is just, she was the reason I went to the archives that day in May of 1991
She was
saying, I
guiding you.
didn't find anything about Nana.
She was
Wow,
guiding you. She wanted you to, she was guiding you.
clearly. I didn't even know what it was. And, but it was, something was pushing me. Just go to the archives, go to the archives. And to my surprise, and I was surprised that I found it. But like I said, when I first found the card, I'm astonished. I'm like, what? What? She was a slave, so I'm trying to process this. But then when I read that interview, that's when I felt the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, I'm reading their words, and here's a man who knew my great grandmother when she was still a sucking child. Wow, wow. She was not just a sweet lady, she was a person who was born a child as well. And she had a past.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I was just astounded by that. And of course, since that time, though, I remember after I kind of composed myself and just said, well, what else is on this reel of microfilm? And I started cranking the microfilm and looking at other family cards rolling by. And I recognized surnames. Wait a minute, I grew up with people. You mean triplets? Oh my God, Brewers. What? I know these. I used to play on the playground with them. And a lot of times on the playground, children would say, oh, my people from Cherokee Nation. Uh-huh. And it's like, ah, shut up. You're not Cherokee. And but little did I know, among those Freedmen records, and even after looking at this set of records, I learned about several weeks afterwards because I sent these records home to my mother in Arkansas and she shared them with my brother and his family. Well, my brother's wife, her family, her mother's maiden name was Johnson, and they were from Shady Grove, right across the river in Oklahoma, in Sequoia County, and they were Cherokee free.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, so many people that we grew up around had this amazingly rich history
Mm-hmm.
from both Cherokee Nation and Choctaw Nation because they were both adjacent
Right.
to Arkansas.
Now, where is she buried at? And in the cemetery, is it a family cemetery or a church cemetery?
Say that again. Where's she buried?
Yes, where's she buried?
She's buried in the town cemetery in Fort Smith. Now, Fort Smith is a sizable city in Arkansas, but it's right on the Oklahoma border. So you could just literally almost look outside your house and wave at people in Oklahoma. It's that close. So Fort Smith is the second largest city in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And when my grandfather, Sam, who was on that card, Sam Jr., who was 9 years old, when he married my grandmother, they moved across the state line into Arkansas, primarily for education. I did see his name on a Freedmen school in Fort Coffee, Oklahoma. But there was no secondary school right there. So he moved across the state line. He wanted his children educated. And so that's how we just came to be living in Arkansas, which is literally just right across the bridge. And but she remained there because she went to live after her husband had died and other, children had grown up and what have you. Then she went to live with her married son and daughter-in-law and the grandchildren, which would have been my father, because my father was her grandson. And so she remained in Fort Smith in that old house that she and my grandmother had both lived there for like 40 plus years. She spent the last 4 decades of her life right there in Fort Smith, but we'd go to Oklahoma all the time because it's literally right down the street. So she's buried in Oak Cemetery in Fort Smith in the old colored section. Now, Sam, who died many decades before she died, he's buried in what is now Howe, Oklahoma, but in the old Scullyville district in the Choctaw Nation in a Choctaw Freedmen burial ground. But she's buried in Fort Smith, and she ended up buying burial plot for the whole family. In fact.
Wow. Any questions, Karen?
There are no questions from the chat room, but regarding the burial, do you think that had she died earlier, would she have been buried in the Choctaw Cemetery?
Oh, yeah. She would have been buried definitely in the Choctaw Nation. Would she have been buried in the same cemetery where Grandpa Sam is buried? Not sure. Perhaps. I think she was, but she was pretty wise because by the 1940s she had purchased these plots in the local cemetery. So clearly she had planned on being buried there because that's where she was living. And then, of course, her own mother died in 1898, and of course I've been lucky because I have found even who Sally's grandparents are.
Really?
And that came after, when 1999, a cousin of mine who was visiting another cousin who lived in McAllister, Oklahoma, he was packing up some things and he said, I found something you might want to have. And he was helping clean out his aunt's house. She had just passed away. And it was a letter, and a letter that had been written to Sally in 1926.
Oh my.
1926, mind you.
Amazing.
And it was written by this man in the Choctaw Nation. He's Choctaw because I looked him up. And he was saying, hello, nice to hear from you. Pray that this letter reaches you in good health, etc. You know how formal people were in those letters in those days. But then he said, I knew your mother, Mandy, and I knew your grandparents. Her parents were Kitty Perry, who married a man called James Crow. And Kitty and James Crow were the parents of Mandy. And then Mandy, and he was giving like this whole genealogy to Sally. And she must have just written to say, do you know them or whatever? Because this was a letter that he was responding to. And he's saying, now, I don't know exactly, but I know that Mandy also married a man called Antitubby. And remember, that was her name on that record, Amanda Antitubby. And so I'm just like, what? And I was able to find out more about Sally's history to her grandparents, and both of her grandparents, James and Kitty Crow. Just amazed me. And they're the ones who actually came from Yalobusha up to Indian Territory in the 1830s. So, wow, what an honor. I was just like, okay, I guess I was meant to know this and to share.
Have you been to Yalobusha yet?
I have. I went to, and well, maybe after COVID, but I've not. I have been to Mississippi, but I need to actually go. I want to go to Noxubee and some other communities because all that was old Choctaw community. But I want to go to Yalobusha, and I want to find, and actually I may have some help in finding it, the old Perry Creek, because there was a Perry Creek, and named after the Perrys who lived there, because in 2000 and I want to say 2009 maybe. No, maybe not 2009, maybe to 2010. I got an email from a gentleman who wrote me and said, I saw your name in an article in the Chronicles of Oklahoma. That's our historical society journal. And I've been trying to reach you. The article mentioned your name, but it also mentioned Nell Perry. Nell
Mhm.
Perry was the one who said Sally was freed. Sally's mother was freed under my sister, Emmeline. Nell Perry was part of the slaveholder family. And this gentleman said, Nell Perry is my ancestor. This
Wow.
man lives near Coweta, Oklahoma. He's an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation today. And he reached out to me. He said, I'm also sending this message to you on LinkedIn. I hope this reaches you. I'll be happy to share information with you. And he's the one, he's actually sent me a picture of Perry Creek. And, but he was a very, very generous man. And I'm very appreciative of Colin Kelly, who was the gentleman who shared his information. And to my knowledge, he is, if not the first, certainly one of the first that I know of a native slaveholding family that has reached out to a descendant
Oh,
of the people that they had enslaved.
mhm.
And he was a very gracious man. He shared pictures of his family with me as well. He came with his cousin Dick, and although cousin Dick is now passed away, but
Mhm.
you know, he's helped me to find other grave sites and things. So
Mhm.
I'm just very grateful to him, and we still keep in touch. We communicate maybe once a month, and he always greets me in Choctaw. I always greet him also in Choctaw.
In Chapter, yes.
So yeah.
I did some research at the courthouse in Water Valley. I
Oh,
was trying to think of what was the county seat in Yellowbush, Wallabusha. It is Water Valley, but let me tell you, there's a lot of historical records there, and it's a great place to research.
I have heard, and that's one reason I want to go specifically to that courthouse,
Mhm.
because from what I understand, in the courthouse, and you won't find them where you think you might find them, but they have information on the people who are being forced west. They have them in the courthouse. And Dr. Daniel Littlefield, who's a preeminent scholar on Indian Territory history, and he's written a book on Chickasaw freedmen as well as Cherokee freedmen. He has particularly pointed out that some of those records you will find of all places in the orphans court records, but it's pertaining to the Indians who are moving west.
Oh,
And he,
really?
yes, and so I'm anxious to get there. Maybe 2022. I'm not planning on traveling yet, but after COVID and the world opens up a bit, I've got to get to that
Yeah,
courthouse.
you have to get to that courthouse.
Wow. I will let you know when I'm coming that way because
Now,
I'm very anxious to.
you mentioned Noxubee, Mississippi.
Yes.
Why do you want to go there?
Well, because I've researched some families that come from there, number
Mhm.
one, and Noxubee is also a Choctaw word. That's an old Choctaw community.
Mm.
So again, I want to go to the courthouse and see if I can locate some other removal records. Especially, I'm looking for people who were taken west as people enslaved, because there are a few records that people are finding, and they may mention people maybe who died during the migration.
Mhm.
There was some records shared in one of our Facebook groups, and it was a record. These were Chickasaws who were being taken west, but they mentioned, oh, one Negro boy died, on the trail, because people don't realize there are black tears on that trail as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And many of them, they had to prepare the camp during the migration. They had to bear a lot of the belongings that were being
Yeah.
taken,
The
and,
weather.
and they were separated from people they left behind.
Mhm.
And I cannot help but wonder if some of those DNA matches that are somewhere down in Mississippi. They don't know a lot about their folks from the 1830s,
Mhm.
and they probably could be descended from some of those loved ones left behind when Kitty was taken west.
Right.
But I'll never know that necessarily. And
Well,
many of them don't have that in their family narrative. But it's still very, very, very important for me
Yes, it is.
to go and look at those records and to be able to call their names, even if I just say their names. Their names need to be said again.
And I'm so
uh,
glad you mentioned that because we have to call our ancestors' name
Yes, yes,
because we're calling on their guidance, we're calling on their spirit. And I do believe that we are our ancestors. We are the past, we're the present, and we're
yes,
the future
yes, yes,
because their DNA is in us.
yes,
Our
absolutely.
DNA is in our children and our grandchildren and those that is yet unborn. So there is a connection of oneness there.
Absolutely. And we are, what did I see someone put something on one of their either their blogs or maybe it was just a post. It said, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams.
yes,
Yes.
I've seen
And we
that.
are. We are. So
Uh-huh.
as we realize that, I think we're obligated to honor them
Mhm.
by telling their story.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I strongly believe that. So,
Well, we've come across several DNA matches from Noxubee, Mississippi,
oh,
in my on my maternal side, and
really?
some of them migrated into Louisiana,
Oh,
and but that same side of my family has a lot of matches in is it Okmulgee?
Ok
Um,
Okmulgee, Okmulgee,
Okmulgee. Yes, yes.
Okmulgee, and that is a Creek word. Okmulgee is sort of in the heart. In fact, it's the capital of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and a lot of people, for whatever reason, maybe they went there for work opportunities or what have you. But Okmulgee is very Creek, very, 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 very Creek, and so you have people in Okmulgee.
We have DNA matches there. I don't know what the connection is, but we absolutely have DNA matches there,
Oh,
and DNA matches a strong line coming from Noxubee, Mississippi.
okay, well, that's very interesting, actually, because of course Noxubee is an old Choctaw community as well, and one of the old treaties, I believe, was signed in that area as well. And I'm not sure; it may have been in fact, the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit, which was signed in 1829. That was the treaty that they signed and said, "Okay, we will go west."
Mhm.
Hmm.
And it was signed somewhere in that Noxubee community. But it's just tremendous history, tremendous, tremendous history. So yeah, oh, just got to get there. Please
Any
let.
questions coming out the chat, Karen?
Just some comments from the chat.
Mhm.
From in Dig, a Mary Seminole Indian. I used to think that Black Americans had an admixture of Indian in our ancestry, but only later did I find out that the Indians were us, darker skin and kinky hair.
Well,
Mhm.
that's a theory.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
a theory.
It comes up a lot. It's
Yeah, it
it's
does.
definitely a
It,
theory that comes up a
it
lot.
does. It does.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, when we're researching our family history, there's a joy that goes with it. There's a sadness because we're learning about what happened to them, what they had to go through.
Correct.
And I often say is that we must do more in finding ways to pass it down to the younger people.
Correct.
Because like you said, Angela, you've been doing this 30 years. It's been 30 years for me. And
Yes.
we do know that, like you said, you know, you're using this time to write. This is where we are right now. You
That's
know,
true.
yeah. And when we go back out to do research, um, it just intensified itself because we realized that our time is really not as much as we would like to have. So we have to use it wisely in
Correct.
researching. But one of the things is that you have really shown people here who really talk about family members that they heard say we have Indian ancestry,
Mhm.
and but they just do not know how to research that.
And a lot of times I have found that a lot of times people will sort of speculate, well, this probably happened because, and in time, in an effort, I guess, to define who they are.
Hmm.
The joy of genealogy is that you're able to prove with
Hmm.
evidence who
Hmm.
people are. And you don't have to make up you know, people. You don't have to make up a story. We're
Right.
following because number one, these records, and we're talking over 20,000 records, 20,000 files from what is now Oklahoma. And but there are records that predate that
Mhm.
period. There are records from 1866 to 1898 when those records that I found were dated, but there are records that predate that as well. And, we don't have to rely on just things that we've heard because the
Mhm.
research provides you with the evidence,
Mhm.
with things that were definitely documented.
Mhm.
And especially, of course, families are always complex. There are all kinds of relationships between different families, different clans. But one of the things for many families is that this is extremely well documented. But I would point out, though, that there are census records that also corroborate this record,
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
data. And in records from Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, all the way up to New England, you
Mhm.
can find blended families. And when I say blended, I mean African and Native people who were documented extremely well, even in the 20th century. If you look at the 1910 Special Indian Census, and I have seen, I've even upstate New York, even Manhattan, right outside of Manhattan is Long Island. And there is a very strong Chickahominy population.
Mhm.
They're on the 1910 Special Indian Census, and you see many of them were biracial. They were African and Native.
Mhm.
And so you see, and it clearly indicates, in terms of who these individuals are. The records are the proof. They provide that evidence. And we're blessed that there are so many records that exist. And it's not just the standard census records, but it's those local records where you're going to find other truths. And the joy of courthouse research.
Oh
You
yeah. Oh
know,
yeah.
you live at the courthouse.
Right. Angela, we would like to talk about your book and how could people purchase your book uh,
Okay.
in these remaining
Well,
minutes that we have.
my one book, if you have it on Amazon, I don't know if you have it to pull it up. If not, but this is, of course, this is volume one of that project that I undertook back in 2017, Freedmen of the Frontier. And of course, it's available on Amazon, and it's called Selected Cherokee, Choctaw, and Chickasaw Freedmen Families. Volume two is a book that focuses on Creek and Seminole families. And as I said in 2017, every week I would write a profile on a different family and put their family
Wow.
history up there. That's available on Amazon. And my first book, Black Indian Genealogy Research, um, is also available. You can get it from the publisher, heritagebooks.com, or you can also get it on Amazon as well. I am working on another book right now. Not sure when it's going to come out. Still working on. Okay, there you see the cover of Black Indian.
Mm-hmm.
That's an expanded edition. The first edition was in 1993. This is a bit larger, but I probably will update that sometimes in the near future because that was still written when the internet was young and before
Yes. Yeah.
digitization. So there are a lot more things that are now available that you can look at that I've
And
written.
I like that you use your ancestors' pictures.
Yes, yes, yes,
It sort of remind me of Bernice's, one of her books.
yes,
You have to because and I know that you feel so happy that you have written them into history.
yes.
You have told their story. You have documented their existence up on this earth, and that's what is so beautiful about that.
Thank you. Well, the thing is that I know that, generations from now, somebody out there is still going to say, Sally Walton. They're going to still call her name. And what is the old proverb, the Yoruba proverb, an ancestor never dies
That's
until there's no one left to call their name.
And
Yeah.
you never know if your book will be utilized as a text
You
in
never know.
classroom uh,
Correct.
some university, you know, it
Yes.
can just, I just think the opportunity is just wide open for you to make sure that everybody know her name,
Yes. Yes.
call her name. And so it's such an honor. And we're just so happy to have you as a guest on the show
Thank
tonight
you.
to share your family history with us. And I know that you're not just sitting home idle, you're working during this pandemic. And I know you're going to come out with something outstanding and great and very informative.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind, and I appreciate your words. Thank you so
And we
much.
want to thank you for joining us. Is there anything you want to say? How could people follow you? Do you have on
Well,
Facebook?
yes, I am on Facebook. Just look for facebook.com slash Angela Walton-Raji, or is it dot Angela Walton-Raji?
Okay.
Facebook. And I am on Twitter, AY Walton. And if someone wants to email me, they can always do that as well, aywaltonraji@gmail.com.
Are you on Instagram as well?
No, I'm not on Well, I'm on Instagram, but I haven't become active on Instagram, and I keep saying I need to do that. So
Mhm.
I understand the feeling. I have to remind myself to go and post on Instagram.
yes, yes, yes. So, but
And
I
and it's a great and so your Facebook pages, people can follow her. Anybody that's really want to learn more about Angela Walton-Raji, please just type in her name. Go to Facebook, go to Google,
and
and
just
learn
send me a
more about the
message.
research that she have done throughout 30 years. That's a long
I was
time.
a child when I started, right?
Yes, yes. And to, what's amazing to me doing this entire research is that you knew you had an ancestor who was a slave and you was in her presence.
Yes, in her
That's
presence.
amazing.
In her presence.
Seriously. And, every day when my mom would come and pick me up after work, I was waking up from my nap in her bed. I was right there next to her, waking up from my nap. She was my heart.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
The last question I have to ask you, do you remember as a child seeing any of her Indian artifacts or personal items she had in the home?
I won't say artifacts, but she would make certain things. She would make a dish out of puffed corn or hominy, which the Creeks call it safki. In the Choctaw Nation, we call it pashofa. And she would make some for me. And of course, sassafras tea. I don't know where she would go to pull this sassafras fruit. She would just go up the road or down the alley or something and come back with these pieces of bark and then wash them off and then boil them and make this most delicious tea that she would let me sip.
What
And
a
she always would pour it in a saucer, blow on the saucer, and let me sip out of it. Not too
Oh, that's
much,
special.
but I didn't know. And of course, the way she cooked, she would cook other things, wild onions and eggs. She never made me grape dumplings, though, but she would make other dishes, tomfula and other types of dishes that I thought was just country food. Didn't everybody eat pashofa? It's like, wow, okay. No, they don't. It's a Choctaw traditional dish. So she practiced her culture, definitely. One of
that's so
my
beautiful.
older cousins remembers her teaching her, trying to teach her expressions. I don't necessarily remember that, although I do know some expressions, but I've learned them, in latter years. But they come to me very easily. So, but and some of my, my uncle and other relatives said, "Oh, don't you remember when she and Uncle Joe were sitting there talking and we didn't know what they were saying?"
How that, yeah.
I was probably just, in
So
the way.
they was talking their native language.
They were speaking their native tongue to each other and
Oh,
having a private conversation. So, yeah.
mm, that's
Uh,
amazing. Well, Angela, it's been a wonderful, wonderful, informative. We could just listen to you just tell
oh,
the story. Oh, even about your
thank you. You're
ancestors.
so
Is
kind.
there anything you would like to say to her, Karen? I asked her.
Well, I have some books to buy. I've been buying so many books lately, and I definitely will buy these books, especially since my family has these connections to some part of Indian territory.
Yes. And
I
Okamoka, you
need to
want to
figure
find out
that
who
out.
they are. Who are the people in Okmulgee? They're probably Creeks, maybe.
I will go back and check the records and begin to do some research. So
We'll
I'll
talk about
probably
that.
order your books tonight.
Okay, thank you so much. And
Thank you for
oh,
being a guest.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you, Antoinette. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate the honor. It's been a pleasure.
And anytime you want to come back on to share anything, please do so.
Okay, thank you. I may take you up on that. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. All right, Karen, you want to go ahead and do what you do?
Okay. Before I close out though, Antoinette, I just want to touch on that Josiah Harrell part.
Yes.
Seen that name in DNA matches.
Oh, really?
DNA matches. Yes. So now I'm going to go back and research that.
Oh,
I don't know if you remember, Antoinette, that we had some Harrells that ended up in Mississippi, then some that ended up in Arkansas.
I remember that.
And
the
so
Harrells, I know that there were some north of Fort Smith in Van Buren, which is interesting. Okay.
There's
So-
a connection to all of us one way or the other, isn't it?
Seriously.
now
Absolutely.
I have some more research to do. Always. I mean, our research never ends. Never
It
ends.
never does.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I just want to thank everybody chat room. And also we have some thank yous for you as well, Angela, chat room. And please leave comments in the comment section below. Go ahead, Antoinette. Thank you for joining us on Nurturing Our Roots. Please give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our videos.
And Karen, would you please ask people to join you when your guests come on to talk about the Jesuit research?
Oh, sure. We have some guests coming up soon on the 20th, I believe. Where we'll be talking about, we'll have a couple of descendants of the Jesuit enslaved ancestors whose ancestors remained in Maryland. They were not part of the ones.
Oh,
who were still
I have to sit in on that.
Yes,
I
so-
would like to know because I will have to talk about that. I'm going to have to make sure I sit in on that. Thank you.
Please do.
Yes.
And next week, I'll be talking about utilizing civil rights records as well as some of the records in the Department of Justice, FBI files, and the NAACP to look beyond 1940. When you can't find your ancestors on these different plantations, you want to know what happened to them. So I'll be sharing some of the records from each division next week. So please tune in, because a lot of times people say, I don't know what happened to my ancestors, where did they go? But I really want to share with people how important it is to look at the plantation records, what these records will tell you, who owned the plantations, and most of the time it would tell you the person who was filing a complaint with being held on that plantation. And those are some new records that we must look at. And in genealogy, I can tell both of you ladies, you can tell me, we're always discovering new records.
All the time.
And all the time. And so I just want people to know how important it is that we start looking at the records that's in the Civil Rights Division at the National Archives, and what these records would tell you about families that was on the plantations, mothers, fathers who had children on these plantations and couldn't get away from those plantations. And I will talk about the family of 5 that was sold for $20.
Wow.
A family of 5 people sold from Mississippi to Louisiana in 1926. So we have some great information coming up. We want to thank everybody for joining us weekly here on Nurturing Our Roots. And we always like to make this announcement. If you have any family history that you would like to share, please email us at nurturingourroots@gmail.com. The one thing I do want to stress, how important it is to share what we have. When my mother passed away last year, my brother brought to me pictures. And so we've been looking at sharing those photographs. So the oral histories, whatever it is, we need to think about sharing, because if we share it, we know it will not be lost again.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for joining us. And once again, Angela, thank you for this very, very powerful hour of discussions that really enlighten all of us, because we don't know everything. We're here to learn,
Thank you. It's
and we're
been
learning every day.
Right. And again, thank you to everybody in the chat room. Please share this video on your own social media as well. And we'll see you again next week.
All right.